Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and writers, editors, journalists, all different people who are putting stuff out so you can get some insight into what they're working on. And this evening, I'm thrilled because we have somebody who is absolutely indispensable to me, to you, to all of us. It is our buddy Rebecca Lewis, who is the senior state politics reporter at City and State New York. I will just say it is without a doubt the best, most informative political paper in New York State, and you are really at the top of the list. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
So you wrote this cover story that said, "Can Andrew Cuomo bounce back?" And you basically said how he could bounce back. Let's just start here because since you wrote that story, he did in fact announce that he was going to run for mayor. Um, ask you to summarize a 1,500 piece in 10 words. How can he bounce back after so many difficulties? He basically resigned from the governorship in disgrace. And lo and behold, he was the front runner in the polls before he even announced he was running. I'm trying to get my arms around it.
It's he's been laying the groundwork for quite some time on this. Basically, since perhaps even before he resigned, as soon as he knew that he was no longer going to be in office. I mean, he was promising, "You haven't seen the last of me." This man has been in politics and elected office, I mean, for most of his life. There's not really an after for Andrew Cuomo. So he's been, keeping a low profile up until now. He has been quietly kind of planning his return. He would occasionally go to churches in the outer boroughs. He would occasionally make appearances as he was quietly making his decisions on what he wanted to do when. And so it was really to his benefit that he was largely keeping quiet this entire time, allowing people to, uh, maybe forget about some of the things that he's done, allow or been accused of, allow some time for some of the accusations to play their course. Yeah, it was really to his benefit to remain largely out of the spotlight for the past couple of years as he allowed some people's memories to move on, allowed some of his own accusations, some of his court cases to get settled, whether it's at the DOJ or, in civil court, where one of the women who accused him of harassment ultimately dropped her case. So it's been an interesting couple of years. He's kept his head down. He's racked up some minor victories here or there, even if it hasn't been, a perfect comeback for him. And he's really set the stage to come back as this problem solver for New York City and try to play up the best parts of his record at a time of really big turbulence for the city.
He's, I guess, hoping that the memories of him being on TV every day during the pandemic, and he was certainly, he handled that, I think, extremely well. He also, listen, every time I get to the airport, I say, wow, Andrew Cuomo built this airport, which has won awards and all that. And so that's on the positive side. Why do you think, and I couldn't really figure this out, that even before he announced, even though Brad Lander, who is obviously in office right now. Scott Stringer is, obviously a former controller and borough president and everything else, well known politician. In addition to popular people in Queens like Jessica Ramos and Zelnor Myrie in Brooklyn. These are people that New Yorkers know, that they trust, that have been integral in our lives, so to speak, in the political world of New York for the past, half a dozen years. Why? I can't figure it out. Why was Andrew Cuomo at the head of the polls even before he said he was going to run? I'm just questioning what's in the minds of my friends and neighbors.
I think it definitely helps to have near universal name recognition, even for former
Oh.
elected officials like Scott Stringer or current citywide officials like Brad Lander, even for popular state legislators like Zelnor Myrie or Jessica Ramos or even Zohran Mamdani.
And Michael Blake, I should mention Michael
and
Blake
Michael
from the
Blake,
Bronx.
former assembly member as well. None of that
And
quite
Michael, by
compares.
the way, was like a vice president of the National Democratic Party. I forgot exactly what his
Yeah,
role was, but he was very big in the National Party for a few years. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah. I know it's just it's hard to compare to Andrew Cuomo when it comes to name recognition. A lot of
Ah,
these early polls are still, do you recognize the name and what do you remember about them? And for a lot of people, still, a lot of people do still remember Andrew Cuomo. First off, they remember his father, they remember the Cuomo legacy, they remember the family. There, people still remember, as you said, the COVID briefings. He was getting national attention. He was on the TV every single day. And for people who might not have been paying the most close attention to some of the more nitty gritty scandals that he went through, for people who maybe enough time has passed without major consequences for some of the harassment allegations that he faced. People remember the good times. It's been a couple years. They recognize his name and they remember that,
I guess so.
he
And
was
it is
around at the time.
interesting. Donald Trump is the president. Anthony Weiner running for office. Scott Stringer has had his bout with accusations as well, and Andrew Cuomo. They've all had accusations without, judging what the legal issues turned out to be, and yet they're all out there prominently, potentially, running for office. I thought it was very interesting, and it struck me that in his announcement, he criticized Democrats. He said the problem has been something to the effect of the problem has been Democrats. And I would think that as someone who's wants to be the standard bearer in New York City for his political party, that was strange. I don't know how else to. I can't imagine any other, Democrat to come out right out and say I'm running for office. It just seemed weird to me. I guess is what I was
I
saying.
I think it's kind of going into the direction that we saw in the aftermath of the November election. There was a lot of introspection. There was a lot of kind of soul searching from the Democratic Party. There was blame that was thrown one way or the other, and I think that there is a lot of concern about, the future of the Democratic Party, how they're interacting with voters, who they're interacting with. This concern that they're not reaching out to working class voters, that they're losing the multiracial coalition of voters that has traditionally been the Democratic Party. And I think that Andrew Cuomo is trying to come in now and speak to that. He's speaking to the the voters who might feel disappointed in the Democratic Party, who feel that the Democratic Party hasn't come to represent them. He's always been certainly a moderate, and he's always enjoyed bridging gaps between the parties, whether that's something that people liked or whether that's something that people didn't like, whether it was to his advantage or other people's advantage. It's something that he's always been very good at, and I think that
Yeah,
that's what he's
I
doing
guess
now,
so.
trying to
Yeah.
speak to everyone, I suppose.
I forget where I read it. It might have been in the Times, could have been in an article that I read in City and State. Said that this really is the beginning for him, and that if he could become the mayor, he's probably got an eye on something, either in the next congressional election or even in the next presidential election. Do you think that's? I mean, I guess we should never not assume that that's what Andrew Cuomo thinks about, but do you think it's a part of a larger plan on his part?
Oh, absolutely. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
I don't, I
I was
don't, I
being
don't,
very
I don't,
cautious. I'm sorry.
I don't pretend to. I don't pretend to understand, or I don't pretend to know exactly what's going on in the mind of Andrew Cuomo. But, it's no
I
secret
know. I
to know,
apologize for that, asking you that.
it's no secret to say that this is a man who has his entire career eyed higher office, whether it was, his run for attorney general, whether it was his run for governor. There was the time when people were talking about him seriously as a presidential contender. And already people apparently are again all like doing that as well. There is already a story in The Hill about, people who might be talking about Andrew Cuomo as a potential 2028 contender. Now, the question is, if he does become mayor, which is, it seems like there's a solid possibility he's certainly leading in the polls right now. If he does become mayor, the question is whether he can break the mayor's curse in New York City and go on to
Ah,
higher office. Um, because a lot of times mayor ends up being sort of a dead end job, whether it's, perhaps of no
whether it's
fault
Michael
of their
Bloomberg
own
or Bill,
or
yeah, whether it's Michael Bloomberg or Bill De Blasio. I mean, that's exactly what happened. Both of them had national, agendas, but those didn't work out. Well, the question I want to ask New Yorkers, New York Cityers, I'm going to make the assumption that they're not satisfied with the Donald Trump presidency. We don't have to go into that. There has been certainly widespread dissatisfaction over the mayor. And so I would think in my own in my own little world, I would think that they would want a change from the conservative Republican or the conservative Democrat, and then look to somebody like Michael Blake or Zelnor Myrie or Jessica Ramos or any of the others really. And yet there is this feeling that there's still a moderate voting bloc out there that would like somebody like Andrew Cuomo, even after a moderate Democrat like Eric Adams that hasn't worked out.
I think that that's one of the debates that you're seeing within the Democratic Party right now. I think that after the last election, some parts of the party saw the outcome as a referendum on quote unquote progressive policies, social issues, focus on those things as opposed to, kitchen table issues, populist economic messages. And it seems like every time there's an election, every time that there's Democratic uh, losses, there's blame that gets thrown around, and very often it seems like the progressive wing is on the chopping block. And I don't think that now is any different. I think that
Wow.
members of the Democratic Party, certainly, or at least leaderships, are once again analyzing what went wrong and saying, we suffered because of XYZ progressive policy, whether it's,
Right.
in New York City, defund the police or whatever. But
Rebecca, we got to go because we're essentially out of time. But price of eggs are up, gas prices are going up. We know what the tariffs might bring. I don't know why that economic issue still hurts Democrats when we see what's going on now. Anyway, you and I could talk for a very long time. Rebecca Lewis, senior state politics reporter at City and State New York. Say hello to Ralph and all my buddies over there. And we appreciate your time so much. And we appreciate your work, which is even more important than your time here. Thank you so much.
thanks for having me back on.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, folks, and then we're going to do an arts segment. Don't go away.